Nickel, all competing currencies, enough to make the Bitcoin almost look passé. Virtual currency has exploded onto the public imagination this year particularly. Fans are hoping it's their passport to a quick fortune. These currencies bypass governments and central banks, regulation and oversight. It's the thing that makes them so attractive, but ultimately uncontrollable. They've been seen since their inception as a shadowy form of trade. But this week they got the seal of approval, or at least recognition, by none other than the Fed chairman. So has their time come? Here's Simon Jack.
There is nothing quite as wonderful as money. There is nothing quite as beautiful as cash. Some people say it's folly, but I'd rather have the lolly. With money you can make a splash.
What is money, really? Well, for most people, it means cash. Here on Ridley Road Market in London's East End, the only way is cash. It's something you can fold up, put in your pocket, stuff it in your mattress if you want. It's something you can believe in. But in some quarters, that belief in paper money is beginning to crumble. Some things have value because they are either desirable or rare, like gold, diamonds or famous works of art. The problem with money is that it is anything but rare. Central banks around the world are printing the stuff like it's going out of fashion. And for some people, it already has. Using horribly complicated computer code, programmers have replicated some of the qualities we value in something like gold. Powerful computers compete like prospectors to unearth or mine the coins in cyberspace, but there is a finite supply of them.
Here you have a token which is impossible to dilute, impossible to counterfeit. And just like people would consider buying gold during inflationary times, they are considering buying Bitcoin. And buying Bitcoin, I think many people are buying Bitcoin because they're afraid of inflation.
So, all very clever. But what's the use of something that only exists in the ether? You can't take that down the pub. Well, actually, you can. Right, a drink, I think. To buy a drink, I'm going to need one of these or one of these.
Here you go, sir.
Great, thank you very much.
£3.20.
Thank you very much. And so that was 0.0071 bitcoins to pay. So far, virtual currencies have been in the shadows of the financial system, an experiment in creating a new form of exchange. But when the world's most powerful banker name-checks them, people sit up and listen.
While these types of innovations may pose risks related to law enforcement and supervisory matters, there are also areas in which they may hold long-term promise.
A word or phrase from the Fed chairman can move markets, and this was no exception. Bitcoin soared in value after these recent comments. Bitcoins are now worth $730 each. Just 2 years ago, it was $3. Virtual currencies can also be used anonymously, making it the perfect black market currency. The Silk Road was an online emporium selling illicit goods for cyber cash. Last month it was shut down by US agencies and the value of bitcoins plummeted.
Bitcoin depends on an entire infrastructure, millions of computers linked together, and it depends on businesses like Bitcoin exchanges, which allow you to switch from Bitcoin to other currencies. It depends on the internet, effectively. And so this idea that it's a sort of post-government currency, a currency able of getting around government, is kind of silly, because government can pull the rug on Bitcoin very easily.
In Canada, there are even Bitcoin ATMs. So should we all rush out and buy them? Well, its extreme volatility is one reason that even its biggest advocates say buyers should beware.
I'd encourage people to do research and only risk as much as they're willing to comfortably lose in Bitcoin or any other virtual currency.
You don't take Bitcoins, do you?
No, I don't. Bitcoin? What's Bitcoin?
So you better keep a few readies on you. You may need them.
Thank you very much. I'll take
That was Simon Jack, and joining us now, the former broker Max Kaiser, now broadcaster, and Jeremy Cook, chief economist at World First Foreign Exchange. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. I wonder if, Max, you think this is the tipping point, that you get the Fed chairman name-checking it. Does it feel mainstream to you now?
Well, first of all, I can tell you that Jeremy is sweating bullets because the Bitcoin does everything his firm does, but faster and cheaper. It's already rivaling Western Union, the #1 money transfer in the world, eclipsing them in volume per day. So firms like Jeremy's now are in the crosshairs.
He looks pretty calm to me.
He's in denial. He's in denial, Emily. He's in denial. It's shock if it hasn't hit him yet.
We've heard from Ben Bernanke talking about how he's acknowledged the Bitcoin, but the caveat that he put on the top of that was about law enforcement. It was about the safety of Bitcoins, the ability to be able to. Obviously, they can't counterfeit them. That's one of the reasons why people buy into these things. But the reason why people are so scared about them is the ability that they can't be traced, the anonymity of it all. And certainly payment institutions like World First, who actually hold the world record for making a payment between two countries, by the way.
But do you believe
But
that?
not for speed and cost. It's much faster. There's $150 million was transferred today using Bitcoin for a fraction of a cost that no firm, including Jeremy's, would ever approach. So this is a real genuine threat to that industry, number one. Number two, you talked about counterfeiting. You can't counterfeit Bitcoin. That's a real problem with the British pound or the American dollar, is that they're being printed willy-nilly to solve lots of problems that politicians can't seem to solve, so they simply print money.
Okay.
People are panicked by what's happening in the banking and the central banks, and they're moving into something that they perceive as having a store of value.
Full risks of them.
Well, they're always talked up. The Bitcoin is always talked up by people who own it because they're speculating, right?
Everyone talks their own book.
The people use it every single day to transfer money all over the world. It has a primary purpose as a means of transferring money, number one. Number two, it's also a currency. That's why it has huge value in this economy.
I mean, what is interesting is the fact that people have chosen something that they think bypasses governments and bypasses regulation. That says something about the climate we live in.
It's a socio-economic movement which we're going through at the moment, and every time you have a socio-economic movement, you have to have a money behind it, a currency behind that, be that gold. And at the moment, this seems to be Bitcoin. I'm happy with that.
What do you mean? What do you mean it's a socio-economic movement?
What does that mean?
It's a libertarian movement. It's a by the people, for the people, get away from big government, get away from big industry, get away from the people polluting the seas and the internet and the global financial crisis. They want to be
the
set
LIBOR
apart
scandals,
from
the Forex scandals, the scandals in HSBC, laundering money. They talk about Silk Road and the Drugs Association. What about HSBC? Billions of dollars of money laundering right there. Yeah. The current scandal with Co-op Bank. People are scared by the banking in this country and around the world.
But you heard the point the commentator made there, that people think it's a post-government currency. It's not, because the government can step on it or stamp it out if they want to.
That's false.
Why?
Because it's completely outside. It's like P2P file swapping hit the music industry. This is the P2P file swapping of money. And so the banking system and the current regulatory environment, it will be as effective at stopping that as the music industry or the Hollywood industry.
Governments have already seized Bitcoins, and if they
couldn't hack into it. The Bitcoins that were...
If they see it as a threat, they will take it off the people. We all know that, and I don't see...
And how do they do that then? I mean, how do they take it off people if they don't even know where to get it?
It's just like I've got cash in my wallet now. There's no way of insuring your Bitcoins against loss. It's one of the big fears about it. They can simply take it off you. They can get it off your computer, and if they feel it as a threat...
Emily, this is what's happening in this industry. The regulatory environment in the US and the UK versus the rest of the world. In China, India, around the world, Bitcoin is now the unbanked of the world. 6 billion people that don't really have access to banking infrastructure as such are now using these currencies, using it with their mobile technologies, and they are going to lead this market. The number one market for Bitcoin right now is in China. And if the U.S. and the UK don't want to compete, if they don't want to compete in this market, then they can go home. We don't want them to compete in this market.
But when you say Bitcoin to people, a lot of people will think automatically of the dark net. They'll think of the drugs. They'll think of the child porn. They'll think of the rather seedy side of the transactions that people don't want to do up front. Isn't that where Bitcoin's going to stay?
No, of course not. That's a very minor part. When Silk Road was busted, Bitcoin started to move up in value because you got rid of what was perceived as a bad agent in the market.
There's a commerce element to Bitcoin, fine, but the majority of the reason why we're looking at Bitcoin now is the huge increase in price, and that's what really takes it away as a currency. If I owe you £200 and say Bitcoin's trading at £200, I can give you a Bitcoin and say, there's our £200 debt is paid. Tomorrow, the value of Bitcoin halves. I've got a way we're not actually paying you 100 quid.
No, that's false.
So the fact that it is doing so well is
because it's so volatile, people can't use it as a medium of exchange.
Bitcoin to any currency instantaneously. Instant
I mentioned
conversion.
all the other virtual money.
There's no currency.
Chaps, we haven't got long.
16% risk that we're seeing on a daily
You make an instant transaction using a service like BitPay, for example. You take no currency risk.
Okay, which not many people will take at the moment, right?
It's a huge industry.
What about all the other currencies I mentioned at the beginning? The peer coin and the hobo nickel and all the rest of it. Do you think there's any I mean, obviously, if you can do an algorithm, you want to code a new coin, right? Will those have any future?
Competition is good.
Very
I mean,
nice
I'm surprised.
internet affectation, I think.
Well, I'm
What
surprised.
affectation?
Yeah,
that aren't going anywhere.
Aren't going anywhere. A nice thing for online. They will always have a following.
Will you ever invest in virtual currency?
I had a look at it a couple of years ago. Had a play, see what the infrastructure behind
Sir
it was,
Richard
and
Branson
sold it back.
just said today he's accepting
Sold it back
Bitcoin for
2 days ago.
his interspatial flight new programs, and he's already booked a $250,000 seed with it. So people are accepting There's 20,000 merchants that accept Bitcoin, and it's growing in popularity.
One thing to do with your Bitcoin. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Probably the most influential man you've never heard of, Sir Johnny Ive, is the Chingford-born design genius.